Picture this. You're standing on the docks of Leith Harbor near Edinburgh in 1561, watching as a mysterious ship prepares to depart under cover of darkness. The cargo being loaded isn't gold or spices, but something far more valuable and shocking: young women from noble Scottish families, including members of Mary Queen of Scots' own extended royal household, being traded to overseas merchants like precious commodities. What you're witnessing isn't just human trafficking. It's a systematic operation orchestrated by Mary Stuart herself, the woman history remembers as the tragic romantic Queen of Scotland. Behind her carefully cultivated image as a cultured Renaissance princess lay the cold calculations of a ruler who viewed even her own family members as assets to be sold when political circumstances demanded it. Before we uncover this buried truth about one of history's most romanticized monarchs, make sure to subscribe to Buried Truths and hit that notification bell. We're about to reveal how the Queen of Scots built a secret network that turned royal bloodlines into profitable trade goods for international merchants. Mary Stuart returned to Scotland in 1561 after spending her youth in the sophisticated French court, where she had witnessed firsthand how political marriages could be used as tools of diplomacy and enrichment. But Mary's ambitions went far beyond traditional dynastic alliances. She had observed the lucrative trade networks that connected European ports with distant colonies, and she recognized an opportunity that other monarchs had overlooked. The challenge facing Mary was that Scotland's royal treasury was nearly empty, drained by years of conflict with England and internal political strife. Traditional methods of raising funds, taxation, trade agreements, and foreign loans would take years to replenish the crown's finances. Mary needed immediate capital to secure her throne and fund the military campaigns necessary to maintain her authority. Her solution was as ingenious as it was ruthless. She would leverage Scotland's most valuable export commodity, young women from noble families who could serve various purposes in overseas markets. These weren't crude slave trading operations, but sophisticated arrangements disguised as legitimate cultural exchanges, educational opportunities, and advantageous marriages with foreign merchants and colonial administrators. Mary's network began with her own extended family and the daughters of Scottish nobles who had accumulated debts to the crown. Rather than forgiving these debts or allowing families to default, Mary offered an alternative. Their daughters could be placed in educational programs abroad, with the understanding that successful placements would forgive family obligations to the royal treasury. The recruitment process was elaborate and carefully designed to avoid suspicion. Mary established what she called the Scottish Cultural Exchange Program, ostensibly designed to provide young Scottish women with sophisticated educations in European courts and colonial settlements. Families were told their daughters would serve as cultural ambassadors, learning languages and skills that would benefit Scotland upon their return. In reality, these young women were being prepared for roles that ranged from household servants to more intimate companionship for wealthy overseas buyers. The educational programs included training in languages, domestic skills, and behavioral modification designed to make the women more valuable in foreign markets. Many never returned to Scotland, instead disappearing into colonial households or merchant establishments across the known world. Mary's most shocking betrayal involved her own half-sisters and female cousins, daughters of various royal liaisons, who possessed enough noble blood to be valuable but lacked the political protection of legitimate heirs. These young women were among the first to be enrolled in Mary's cultural exchange programs, their royal bloodlines making them particularly attractive to foreign buyers seeking prestigious additions to their households. The logistics of Mary's operation were managed through a network of Scottish merchants who had established trading relationships with colonial settlements in the Americas, Asia, and Africa. These men served as intermediaries, arranging transportation and negotiating prices with overseas buyers, while maintaining the fiction that they were facilitating legitimate cultural and educational opportunities. The financial returns from Mary's human trafficking network were substantial and immediate. A single placement could generate enough income to fund military campaigns for months, while the ongoing nature of the operation provided a steady stream of revenue that allowed Mary to maintain her court and political activities without relying solely on traditional taxation or foreign loans. The psychological manipulation required to maintain this system was sophisticated and cruel. Mary cultivated relationships with the families of her victims, presenting herself as a benevolent patron who was providing opportunities for their daughters that would otherwise be impossible. Parents were encouraged to view their daughters' departures as honors rather than sacrifices, prestigious appointments that reflected their family's importance to the Scottish crown. The young women themselves were gradually conditioned to accept their fates through a combination of luxury treatment and subtle coercion. They were housed in comfortable quarters, provided with fine clothing and education, and told repeatedly how fortunate they were to be selected for such prestigious opportunities. By the time they understood the true nature of their situations, they were already aboard ships bound for distant shores. Mary's operation included sophisticated documentation that created the appearance of legitimate arrangements, while concealing the commercial nature of the transactions. Contracts were written in language that suggested educational exchanges or matrimonial arrangements, while the actual financial components were handled through separate agreements that left no obvious paper trail connecting the Queen to the trafficking network. The international scope of Mary's trafficking operation was impressive and disturbing. Scottish women were sent to Spanish colonies in the Americas, Portuguese settlements in Brazil, English trading posts in India, and Dutch commercial centers in Southeast Asia. The diversity of destinations made it difficult for any single authority to recognize the pattern or trace the women back to their common origin in Scotland. The buyers in these overseas markets included colonial administrators seeking educated European wives, wealthy merchants looking for skilled household managers, and plantation owners requiring supervisory staff who could manage other workers. The Scottish women's education and noble backgrounds made them particularly valuable for roles that required literacy, cultural sophistication, and the ability to maintain European standards in foreign environments. Mary's most elaborate deception involved her correspondence with foreign courts, where she presented her trafficking operation as a form of diplomatic gift-giving. She would write to foreign rulers offering to send cultural ambassadors or educational specialists as gestures of friendship and alliance, while privately negotiating financial compensation that was disguised as trade agreements or diplomatic concessions. The psychological impact on the victims of Mary's network was devastating and long-lasting. Young women who had grown up expecting to marry within Scottish society and maintain connections to their families instead found themselves permanently separated from everything familiar, forced to adapt to foreign cultures and serve masters whose languages and customs they barely understood. Some victims attempted to escape or seek help from local authorities, but their foreign status and lack of local connections made successful resistance nearly impossible. The legal systems in colonial settlements offered little protection for women who had ostensibly agreed to their situations, while the distances involved made return to Scotland practically impossible even for those who might have found assistance. Mary's trafficking network also included provisions for dealing with women who proved unsuitable for their intended roles or who caused problems for their buyers. These individuals could be transferred to other buyers, sent to even more remote locations, or simply abandoned in foreign ports where they would be forced to survive through whatever means they could find. The financial success of Mary's operation encouraged her to expand the network beyond her immediate family and noble households. She began recruiting women from merchant families, skilled craftspeople, and even educated servants who possessed abilities that would be valuable in overseas markets. The criteria gradually shifted from noble bloodlines to practical skills and physical attributes that buyers specifically requested. The end of Mary's trafficking network came not through moral awakening or legal intervention, but through the political upheavals that eventually cost her the Scottish throne. As her authority weakened and she faced increasing opposition from Scottish nobles, the practical difficulties of maintaining such an elaborate secret operation became insurmountable. The final shipment of women from Mary's network departed Scotland in 1567, shortly before her forced abdication. The political chaos that followed made it impossible to continue the sophisticated coordination required for the trafficking operation, while Mary's own exile to England eliminated her ability to manage the network from Scottish soil. When Mary Stuart was finally executed in 1587, she took with her the full knowledge of how many women had been sacrificed to fund her political ambitions. The carefully maintained records of her trafficking operation were destroyed by supporters who recognized that revealing the extent of her crimes would damage not just Mary's reputation, but the legitimacy of monarchy itself. The buried truth about Mary's human trafficking network remained hidden for centuries, known only through fragmentary references in merchant records, colonial documents, and private papers that survived the systematic destruction of evidence. Modern historians who have examined these sources struggle to determine the exact number of women who disappeared into Mary's network, but estimates suggest that hundreds of Scottish women were sold into overseas servitude during her brief reign. Mary's story serves as a chilling reminder that even the most romanticized historical figures can harbor depths of cruelty that contradict their public images. The queen, who inspired countless romantic legends and tragic operas, was simultaneously operating one of the most systematic human trafficking networks in 16th century Europe, treating her own family members as commodities to be sold for political advantage. Her legacy forces us to reconsider our understanding of female power in medieval Europe and the methods that ambitious women employed to maintain authority in male-dominated societies. Mary's trafficking network demonstrates that gender was no barrier to participating in the most exploitative practices of the era, and that women in power could be just as willing as men to sacrifice others for their own advancement. Today, as we continue to combat human trafficking and work to protect vulnerable populations from exploitation, Mary Stuart's story reminds us that these crimes are not new phenomena, but have ancient roots in the willingness of powerful individuals to treat other human beings as property. Her network stands as a historical precedent for the systematic exploitation that continues to plague vulnerable populations around the world. The queen who lost her head to the executioner's axe had already lost her humanity through her willingness to trade in human lives, demonstrating that political ambition without moral constraints can transform even royal blood into something monstrous. Her trafficking network remains one of history's most shocking examples of how power corrupts and how even family bonds can be sacrificed on the altar of political necessity.